Well, welcome everybody. Right at the end, I get to finally say welcome when you're all about to go home. Thank you for coming to DevDays. I hope you've all enjoyed DevDays, yes? I just privately, just secretly, so only you know, have to admit that it's a bit of a mixed blessing having such a great DevDays, because that means we'll do it again, which means I'll have to come here again. Frank was on safe ground when he was talking about aeroplanes for this community, but possibly I fly the most of all of us. So it's been really good for me to see such a great turnout, and I've really enjoyed to see DevDays that I know from Amsterdam. I've really enjoyed seeing it come here. I hope you'll all go home and tell your bosses or whoever paid for you to be here how great it was, and that you'll come again and catch all the presentations that you couldn't see because you were seeing some other presentation next time you come. And for me, and I've heard this a few times, I've heard myself quoted on this a few times, the most important part of what we are is the community of people who are the FHIR community. And so thank you all for being part of that. So I try and do something new and interesting as part of my keynote. So here is my heart rate. I had an Apple Watch here and a little app that some helpful friend wrote for me, running on my phone, grabbing my watch data, my heart rate, posting it to the public test server using the vital sign profile, and then I got this little app here on the screen picking it up and posting it. You'll notice it's a little bit small, but if you look at, if there's no data and there's an error message instead, that will plot the error message on the observation. There's a prize for the first person who gets their name on the screen. Because you could, if you could figure out, I guess gave you all the information you need. So thank you for the helper who helped me put that little cascade together. I just wanted to demonstrate that we're entering a new time, a new age of data integration. And times, they are changing. So last week, 2 weeks ago, I was at a meeting in Australia, and the meeting was between a group of vendors who are responsible for providing the backbone for message exchange between institutions in Australia. In some ways it's really cool. Any institution can deliver any clinical content to any other institution securely. It's kind of like direct, but it's only, and it's been in production for a long time, and it kind of nearly works. It would work, except that there's a few things each of the parties does differently. Some of them using CDA and some of them using HL7 V2. And I was treated to a hour-long discussion about whether they should all converge to version 2 or whether they should all converge to CDA. And because I was in the room, yes, I know. Because I was in the room, someone eventually said, well, Grahame, what do you think? I said, well, clearly version 2 and CDA are not the future. Clearly FHIR is where everybody's going. And I don't need to tell you at the end of this DevDays why I think that. I think it's pretty evident. It's only a question of how quickly that's going to happen. And how quickly you think that will happen will drive whether you think that you should try wasting money converging on something that's not the future. And they all said, meh. And then they started talking about that, and it became very clear that they expect that the healthcare system will go on as it has always gone on. The pace of change will be the pace of change that they've experienced in the past. And I sat there listening to the discussion thinking, it's like a bunch of surfies sitting out on the break, judging where the next wave will come by looking at the shore and seeing what's been. But you guys are here, you've seen what's coming. We're suddenly crossing a tipping point. And FHIR is responsible for part of the tipping point, to create the capability of a totally different outcome. And And you might have seen the data analysis presentations, Eel's work, but Ryan as well, and others. And when I go around the community and practice and visit people, data analysis is a huge outcome for FHIR, which is not one that we chased, right? We were chasing interop. Data analysis is never on our roadmap, and yet here we are. People saying, to quote Ryan, structure definition rules all. That's not quite what he said. But we've really, that's an unexpected bonus from our point of view. But even the combination of the Argonaut work, a certain very large vendor having a massive impact by adopting the Argonaut specification. It's not like the most technically groundbreaking work, but as I travel around the world, I constantly hear from politicians and CEOs and clinical leads, Apple. It's not that it's technically amazing, but it represents a totally different way of thinking about healthcare, that they're suddenly realizing change is coming at us, the disruption is here now. From my point of view, we set out to do two things. When Lloyd, Ewart and I sat down, when we first started working on the FHIR project, even before it was called FHIR, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to change healthcare IT, and we wanted to change healthcare. And I think now that it's clear that we've changed healthcare IT. It's not that the change is complete. There's a whole pile of stuff to be done, but the process is in train now. It's going to happen. And it's still up to us to make it happen well and to support it as best we can, but expectations have changed. and that's what we wanted. And now we want to do that to health. We want to make it possible to share healthcare data and to leverage the sharing and to create a new set of capabilities. And really what we want to do is change the meaning of platform in healthcare. Platform used to mean your network operating system and your network or your physical network, but it's a long time since we talked about that as our platform. So we want to float the boat up and make a platform more and more capable and change the way healthcare works. And so for me, when I look forward and say, where are we going, the FHIR project? In the FHIR project itself, the technical standard, we've got an agenda, we've got a maturity process, we've got engagement, it grows. Those are great things. But those are not anymore the focus. That's not where we're looking. Now we're looking beyond that. The things that I'm trying now to create and to see through, and that I'd like all of your help with, is things like, so on Monday I was at the White House and one of the Office of Innovation of American Innovation guys said to me, what we want to see is a market in healthcare data. We want to see the kind of things we've seen with GPS data and weather data and other kinds of data that have created new markets, that created new capabilities, that created better lives for people. We want to see that in healthcare. That's great. That's great. That's one of the things we want to see. But if we're going to see that, we need to be able to scale up healthcare information sharing. And to do that, we've got to be able to computably resolve the kind of questions Devon was talking about. And we can't yet. The people who make the policy questions and the policy forms and the choices patients have create non-computable choices. And we don't know how to make computable choices that are compelling to those people. And so that's a challenge for us, is to bridge that gap so that then we could actually go to the policy people and say, no, you actually need to give people computable choices so that we can scale up information sharing. But right now we don't have any compelling computable choices to offer. And that's mostly the consent resource and a lot of work on that. Another obvious focus is getting data in the hands of patients. Now, I have a different perspective probably than most of you in this room because I travel the world and I work with extremely socialist, bureaucratic governments where getting hands in the getting data in the hands of the patient is a non-sentence. But still, it's about getting healthcare services into patients' hands. But in other countries, it's a discussion to get data in the hands of the patients. And I do want to introduce someone to you all. Dave, over here. Just step forward so more people can see you. I asked Dave to come here today. This is e-patient Dave Bronkhart. Thank you, Dave. Please catch up with Dave at the drinks after this. That was the point, Dave. Now everyone knows who you are. Yeah, we don't need to buy you a drink here, Dave. Dave is a well-known advocate for getting data in the hands of the patients, and I asked Dave to come here. He leads one of the leaders of the Society of Participatory Medicine, and I asked Dave to come here today. It's partly about culture sharing between the Society for Participation in Medicine, which is more than just getting data to the patients, and that, for me, that's key. And for me, all the use cases we're chasing are about participation in medicine. So thanks for coming, Dave, and do talk to Dave, and it's about creating relationships, having Dave here. The first thing that we talk about is getting data in the hands of the patients. But for me, all the patients that I know, their lives aren't changed by having data. There's a very small portion of patients that I know who actually lives are improved by having their data, and that's the patients where their diagnosis is problematic. But as soon as the diagnosis is sure, then there's not really much point having data. On the other hand, it's all the patients' carers. They're children of elderly parents or parents of young children. The parents, or those people, the carers, they're actually providers of healthcare. And the current arrangement in most countries, they're shut out of the healthcare system. They're considered not part of the providers of healthcare, but they are the primary provider of healthcare. And they're the ones that are desperate for data, but not really for data. They're desperate for access to be part of the system because they are the leading part of the system. And yet they're cut out of the system. It's a really bizarre arrangement. And so for me, it's not about getting patients their data. It's about creating an integrated healthcare system where patients' carers are a key part of the healthcare system and have a proper role in the healthcare system. And that at the moment isn't really possible because of because of information barriers, information processes, information policies. The technology is just a minor issue. So the use cases I'm really interested in seeing FHIR applied to, if you get a chance to advocate to managers, to marketers, to politicians, is the kind of processes that lead to distributing the healthcare process, distributing the services an institution provides outside its physical borders, extending to healthcare in the home. So John Halumpka's presentation, he talked about how they're doing that. That's exactly the kind of stuff that is what will change healthcare as we get better and more agile at extending the healthcare processes outside the institution. And one that's really dear to my heart in this space is the story that I hear constantly. I was at my GP, he referred me to a specialist put me on a particular set of medications and care plan, went back to the GP and the GP said, "Oh, don't do that. That doesn't make any sense. Don't take that medicine." And then I went back to my follow-up at the specialist, who said to me, "If you're not going to take the medications I told you to, why are you coming to me?" And how's the patient supposed to make sense of that? And yet I hear that constantly. When I tell that story anywhere in the world, people go, "Yeah, I've experienced that. I've heard that. That's my experience too." Well, that's just ridiculous. And so what I want to see is care processes where all the people caring for a patient have access to a common care plan. They don't tell the patient to ignore advice from other clinicians. They discuss it with each other through a discussion forum associated with the patient's care plan. There are processes in the world, places in the world where this happens for a particular kind of care. And 2 years ago, when I was here in the States, I'd hear constantly discussion about the importance of this kind of care. No, I've stopped hearing anything about it. It's not happening. But to me, that is what will make a difference to patients. And so I'd love to see projects like that. You need clinical champions, you need support from in a locality. There's a bunch of things you need. It's not an information technology problem. But if you don't have the information technology, you won't have any possibility. So that's where we come in to enable that. Then, all the time that I've been in medicine, from when I first started, first working in a lab, one of the common themes that I've heard about is the learning healthcare system. And it's become ever more common to hear about the learning healthcare system. And as a researcher, of course the researchers think a learning healthcare system is a great idea, but it's such an inefficient process that we have. And if you look across the current draft of FHIR, and in particular if you wait a few weeks and look again, you see that we're starting to have a set of resources that work in a coherent framework, in a web framework that leverage all the stuff around FHIR, the CDS hooks, the Smart on FHIR, all the web stack, all of the knowledge, the community, and those cover, it doesn't really matter. So those cover, now that set of resources covers from really low-level terminology stuff, core patient management, patient care planning, plan definition, plan management itself, outcomes assessments. Then moving on to that, we're now going to start seeing guideline assessment, guideline sharing, patient education sharing. We're starting to get a really holistic view across the healthcare system. And suddenly a computable learning healthcare system is actually a possibility. I don't think many people have really imagined what a difference that will make when it finally comes together. Now, don't misunderstand me. Some of these are very long-term projects, because when we introduce interoperability into an area, it takes 10 years for people to get their heads around changing processes because of it. So these are long-term projects, but when we actually have all those things in the one place, we really start to change the way people can think. And some of the stuff we've seen this week about sharing and bringing data knowledge and AI and data analysis to bear at the point of care starts to become really, really effective when you have such a broad array of information to call on. So those are some of the use cases that I'm looking for people in the FHIR community to work on, and for the FHIR community in the technical specification to support. And as you can see, we're at the point now, this year is really busy banking the normative FHIR specification, getting that out of the way, and hopefully we can do that, and then we can start really focusing on what can we really do with the platform. So there's two kinds of platforms. We've built a platform through FHIR. It's a platform for knowledge, a platform to transform healthcare, and that's what I'd encourage you all to think about. And finally, and as I started with this, I'm going to finish with this. What we do is a team game. You can't do this alone. You can't change healthcare. You can't even do healthcare alone. From top to bottom, healthcare is a team game. The thing that's most rewarded me for all the hard work that we do is not the specification, and it's not the political impact, and it's not all of the solutions. The thing that most rewards me is the way that the culture that we created of open team communication, of open collaboration, to see that spreading horizontally and vertically within the community, and then spreading into other communities, having other unrelated communities coming and saying, we want us to practice that too. They don't need to practice it with us, they just need to practice that openness, to see it reaching into commercial companies and having commercial companies sharing frameworks and methods and libraries and approaches and collaborating on standards at a much deeper level. That's the best thing of all, because healthcare, if the teams are fractionated across commercial barriers, we just will never be able to scale. We won't be able to scale the system. So the most important thing that we have is the culture of sharing. And thank you for coming to DevDays and taking part in that sharing. And I encourage you all to keep spreading the sharing and the collaboration and to share the mission of transforming healthcare IT and health. Thank you.